Hi, this is Heather Box from the Million Person Project, and the Million Person Project is a global project about love, storytelling, and connecting changemakers. And I am excited today to be here with Michael Morgalis from Get Storied, and we are going to be having a conversation about the power of stories. So, hi, Michael.
Hey, Heather.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure. I'm an educator, I'm an anthropologist, and I'm a storyteller. And for the last 15 years have been looking at storytelling in the context of innovation. So how change agents, how entrepreneurs and cultural creatives, how do you actually tell that story when what you're doing by definition is disruptive, challenges people's current understanding of the world?
Well, thank you so much for joining this conversation with me today.
Of course.
And one of the things that I would love to hear from you is just what is your personal story in relationship to stories? Why stories?
It's like the saying goes, we teach what we need to learn most.
Yeah,
and so, the short end of it, I used to suck at telling my story. Like, I've always been good with words, good with ideas, yet I would find myself in really high stakes, high pressure situations, completely tongue-tied and twisted. And, I think one of the moments that it really hit me, I was 23 years old, I was a social entrepreneur, sort of my first career right out of college, and like a lot of entrepreneurs, I used to work double shifts, and one of my mentors, who was like my board chair, he used to work alongside me, and we once met at like 10:30 at night. And there was some really big things that were going on in this organization at the time that I was running, and it was it was one of those sorts of situations where I'd been totally flying by the seat of my pants, figuring everything out as I went. But within about 12 months, like, we'd had people like the Rockefeller Foundation funding us, and a lot of things, exciting things that were happening, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? But here I was running this thing, and because I was very committed to it, we're doing work around the digital divide. And I went into this meeting, and to make a long story short, I got so tongue-tied and twisted, I literally started choking on my own tongue. To the point where, my mentor, thought I needed to go to the hospital.
Oh, no.
Because I was so frustrated, and I didn't know how to communicate what I really needed or what needed to change. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me then. And it's not like everything magically changed overnight, but it was this recognition, and I especially felt it when I that episode in my life of about 2.5 years as a social entrepreneur, because about 12 months in, we got all this funding and great things, and about 12 months later, epic crash and burn. Everything fell in on itself. It's the classic startup story, right? But when the sort of picking up the pieces from that experience, I had the sense something was missing from the conversation. Like the way that we talk about social innovation, and as an anthropologist, I was like, there's something about culture, about identity. People wanted to tell the save the inner city story, all these cliches that just kind of felt gross to me. And to me, there was a deeper story about what does it take to thrive in the digital age. So it's been about 15 years of just exploring that riddle. And in the process, looking at my own life experiences too, of having grown up across a lot of different cultures, and coming from a very untraditional, unconventional childhood, and then seeing how the internet and innovation economy of the last 15 years means that we're all doing something new and different. And how do you tell that story? And how do you do it in a way that doesn't have to be adversarial, that doesn't have to be so bloody? That's a huge part of the inquiry for me.
And what do you mean by unconventional childhood?
Sure. Well, so picture this. My dad is a mad scientist and inventor.
Wow.
Born in the bush of Africa. If you think of like Doc Brown from Back to the Future, that's my dad.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and then my mom is a teacher, artist, and toy designer who grew up in the frozen tundra of upstate New York. And my mom's like Mary Poppins. So you can imagine, like, I'm the mutant love child of these two characters. And, you know, I lived in a household where creativity ruled the house. We also grew up as expats, first 9 years of my life in Switzerland. And I mentioned my dad being from Africa. So there's always been this sense of sort of being the misfit. Like, we don't really fit in or belong anywhere. And yet, we kind of have a unique perspective on things. So both of my parents are absolute iconoclastic visionaries who see things that other people don't see and have devoted their life to that inquiry. And then I've also seen them at times struggle the challenges of how to get others to see what they see. And likewise, right, I've experienced the same thing. What do you mean people? How come people don't see the bigger story? It's so obvious to me. But then, you know, how do I explain this? And oftentimes it feels really subtle. It's these little nuances. And we often aren't even aware of sort of the hidden elements to how we're framing and presenting our story, and that it might actually repel and push people away more than attract. So I was blessed, you know, growing up in my household. I never knew if my day would be a science experiment or an art project. And my mom is big into assemblage art. So we, you know, once we moved to Los Angeles, you know, our garage, we didn't have cars in the garage. Instead, it was our atelier. It was our workshop filled with materials.
Cool.
And we would go to garage sales. And what everybody else was throwing away as trash, we would buy, and they would become the materials for building worlds in a box. And so I learned at a very young age, actually, the process of telling stories. For people's birthdays or anniversaries, weddings, we would build them a world in a box based on their life story.
Well, the thing that strikes me about what you're saying is it's something that I talk about a lot in my work, about letting the nuances of what is exist.
Yeah.
And how so many times when we come to tell our stories, we think, oh, we need it to be like this linear thing. Like, I struggled with this, and then I overcame, and now this is why I know you can overcome too. And like all of the nuances.
Sunflowers and lollipops.
Yeah. And all of the nuances are lost in that.
Yes.
And so I'd love to hear what you think is the most, like, how to construct a story. Like, what is the pathway?
Sure. Well, so let's kind of set the table, because I think that there's a few really important elements that we tend to overlook or underestimate, especially as a change agent. And that is the biggest obstacle you face as a change agent is disbelief. What are you talking about? Are you for real? What is this? What is it that you're selling me? Can I trust you? So disbelief is the obstacle, the biggest obstacle that we face. And so if disbelief is that obstacle, we have to approach the construction and the framing of our narrative in a very specific way. So the first thing that we have to do is answer the number one question in the back of everybody's mind, which is, are you just trying to sell me more shit? Or do you give a shit about my world and making it better? Right? Are you selling crap, or do you give a crap? And that's, you know, I'm being a little over dramatic here, but it's this notion of, do I belong in this story? Is this story for me? So we're making split-second decisions every single day of our life. When you open your email inbox, when you're looking at your social media feeds, right? All of these demands for our attention we're basically asking ourselves, do I belong in this story? Okay, so that's part of setting the table. We got to recognize there's disbelief, and then people are asking, do I belong in this story? So then the question is, well, how do you create the conditions for receptivity? So the first step, we actually have a methodology called Lean Story. And it's a 6-step methodology. We teach the short version of it in 3 steps. So the first step of Lean Story is what we call finding the frame. And finding the frame, quite simply, is about context. And when you set context, what you need to do is you need to describe the change. What is changing in the world? And what is possible because of that? You see, we've all been taught to start with the problem. But when you start with the problem, you actually put people on the defensive. You get people to shut down. Because, let's be honest, who likes to talk about our problems? I mean, imagine you walk home, you walk in the door after a long day's work and you're, greeted by your significant other and they go, Heather, we've got a problem. Let's sit down. Right? How are you feeling in that moment?
Yeah, dread.
Right? You're like, oh crap, what did I do? Oh man, this is going to be a heavy trip you're about to lay on me. Right? And then your partner lays a heavy trip on you and you're defensive, you feel like crap, you don't really know what to think, but then they go, okay, but all right, don't worry, I have the answer. I know exactly what you need to do. How does that story go?
Yeah, it's not a good story.
Okay. So we all know this intuitively in our interactions with our intimates. And yet what we're all doing as change agents, we go out in the world and we're saying, that's wrong. This is right.
When the subject matter, when the story is tough.
Yes.
And you are speaking to the people who are playing a role in perpetuating the story or the status quo that is not serving you or the community at large. What do you believe is the most important thing to be able to create receptivity?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, are you creating room in the story for this person to self-identify and in a way where they are not the victim or the victimizer? See, and this is one of the challenges, because who wants to be cast in that role? Right? So this is where we've got a long ways to go, and it's a real practice to cultivate around really cultivating empathy and compassion in a way that's about not about making our audience wrong, but actually, again, bringing forward this paradox or this dilemma, the challenge of our time. Take something like, say, global warming, climate change. How do you engage people on a cause or an issue like that? Or take something like homelessness. I've never been homeless. How do I don't know anybody who's been homeless directly, so how do I relate to that? So you gotta figure out what are the angles that make it more relatable. I haven't been homeless, but I do know what it feels like to not have enough money to afford a warm enough winter coat to get through a New England winter. And to have to wear 6 layers of sweaters and long johns and really crappy jackets to stay warm. And I'm always cold. I don't stay warm enough. Or not having enough money that I had to scrounge in my in my living room sofa to find enough change to go buy a $5 lunch, right? So, or I know what it feels like, that moment of in your life where you just feel so completely, utterly alone. Even though you could turn to family or certain people, you're going through a hard time and people could bail you out or support you, but you have so much pride and sort of this stubbornness of I can't let somebody see me like this. So those are those are examples of those are potential pathways into a shared empathic experience. So what does it feel like not to have a home? In a home where Like for instance, I am homeless. I'm a nomad for the last 10 months, but it's a different kind of homeless versus like living on the streets. So, or take something like, like climate change. It's really hard to wrap one's hands around that at a personal level. Like, how do I belong in this story? I mean, yes, I know, okay, we're looking at the potential annihilation of our species over the next 100 years. Like, I can intellectually get that, but it's so abstract, and I feel like such a lack of personal agency. How will little old me do anything on that to make a difference? So it just brings up a sense of hopelessness, a sense of existential, right, sort of like nihilism. It's like, oh my God, what can I do? It just makes you depressed, right? Makes you feel like crap about yourself and about the world. So, and I've spent some time with a few big environmental organizations, and a lot of the work that we have focused on is how to take the issue of environmentalism and to really help people build a more personal relationship to their local environment, right? Because so many of us, if you're living an urban-centered life, you don't really have a relationship to story of place. You've probably moved around a whole bunch. Maybe you've only lived in your town for 3 or 5 years. Like we're not connected to making, for many of us, unless you're, a hipster in Oakland or Brooklyn or Portland, like you don't make your own food. You don't grow your own sprouts or make your own cheese. I mean, there's a reason why those things are coming back about. But there's a way that so many aspects of the natural world are foreign to us. And it feels kind of scary. So it's this notion of how do you make friends with the natural world? And from that place, then you start to care about it. Then you start to realize, oh, yeah, this is my home. This is my community. And I want to be involved in taking care of this place. I have a sense of ownership over place. But if you don't address the fact that so many of us feel transient, alienated, sort of, I'm just passing through, and I don't know, like, do I really belong here? Is this my community? Is this my neighborhood? Do I know my neighbors? It becomes really hard to get people to care about the environment. People are just struggling to put food on the table and a roof over their heads and feel that they're just passing through. So, there's elements of this. It's just like coming back to the fundamentals of what does it feel like to really feel like you've landed in your life, to feel like you've landed in community, to feel like you've landed in relationship to others. And we have to look at those fundamentals and to tell bigger stories about that, bigger stories about the human experience. And we have to approach it with compassion. It's really a process of nurturance and looking at where's the fertile soil. The last quick thing that I'll mention on this, we spend way too much time trying to convince the naysayers instead of paying attention to where's the fertile soil. There are so many people who naturally identify to the work that you're doing. Draw them in. Find your true believers. Nurture them. Cultivate them. Gather that tribe. Focus on fertile soil instead of hard asphalt. Because there's such an energy suck. And there's so much energy that we put on needing to convert.
Yeah.
And if somebody is on a really fixed position, it's like you're pushing against a wall. Or it's like Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill. I know where to find you next week. You're going to be pushing that same rock up that same hill. And to what end? Right? Like, to what cost does that come to your own health and well-being? And I mean, I've gone through multiple cycles of, the entrepreneurial sort of cycles of like full tilt, complete burnout, physical breakdown, and it's one of the big shadow aspects of being the change agent and the innovator is we don't always pick the right or the best battles to fight.
Yeah, well, I just love the idea of in our stories to make room for other people in our stories. Yes. And even if it's someone that you're working against or that's how you feel, it's how does your story invite them to be a part of it? So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And
you're
where
welcome.
can people learn about
Sure.
the work that you're
Yeah.
doing and more about these steps and how to tell stories and
Yeah.
move
So
audiences?
come join us at getstoried.com. And if you go to getstoried.com/red pill, you can take our free storytelling mini course. Just like Neo in the Matrix, you take the red pill, you will never look at storytelling in your life the same. And you can also then check out the new About Me. That's one of our online courses that teaches you how to share your personal story in a professional context. So it's the story of who you are, what you do, who you serve, and the fact that before any business meeting, you've been Googled. People are going to experience your story before they experience you in real life. So how do you tell that story authentically? How do you tell that story without bragging, without boasting, without sounding like a jerk? So we have a 7-step methodology around that. You can also check me out on Twitter at GetStoried. We've got almost more than 250,000 followers. I share a lot through Twitter. And I'm also in the midst of a Story World Tour. And I'm teaching all around the world in 2016, in North America, in Australia, India, and Europe. So if you go to our website, you can find out about those various programs. And if you get on our email list, you can learn if we are coming to your town or community. And in the meantime, we got lots of great stuff online in our learning platform. So we're here to support you, especially as a change agent and innovator, and absolutely love the work that you're doing, Heather, in really inspiring us and provoking us to really look at what story are we telling, and is it the right story for the future we want to create? And I'm so incredibly inspired and touched by the work that you're up to, and the gift of this storytelling series.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and thank you viewers for tuning in. And check out Michael at getstoried.com, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.